Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sports Dadcast. I am your host, Bo Bingen. And before we get started tonight, I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you can, leave a like on the video, subscribe so you get notified when the next ones come available. We're going to talk some college basketball tonight. I've got the two Mitches on with me, and they are going to tell us why we should all be taking our hard-earned American dollars and betting it all on Marquette, the Golden Eagles, to win the national championship in the college basketball tournament this coming month. But we're not going to start with Marquette. We're gonna make you wait on that one. We're gonna start with the one seeds. Mitch Lidke, the last five winners of the national basketball competition has been one seeds. The last five. If the next one this year, if that trend continues, if it's going to be a a one seed between Alabama, Houston, Purdue, and Kansas, which one do you think it's going to be?
Yeah. Well, first off, Bo, thanks for having us back on. I think the last time we chatted was during football season, and I know a lot has changed there. Quick shout out to our guy 12. The fact that the Packers are moving on into a new era. I was in my feelings a bit today. I feel like we're ready to move on, but I was watching some Rodgers highlights and felt like I was cutting onions. So I just wanted to give a shout out to 12, everything he's done for us as a fan base. But yeah, no, glad to be back on talking March hoops. To pivot back to your question on the one seeds, I feel like the main portion of the public's going to be on Bama, rightfully so. They felt like they've been like the best team from start to finish. But I'm going to pivot a little bit, and the team that I really like this year from a one seed perspective is Houston. I feel like they're kind of the one seed that's flying under the radar because they're in the, non-power 5, non-power 6 conference. That said, I think a lot of that is dependent on Sasser's health. I saw today him out in warmups and in practice, and it looked like his groin was doing well. But the big thing that I look for, and I think this will be a consistent theme for me, is senior guard play or experienced guard play, and Sasser is just that, right? He's the best player on Houston, a team that has been pretty dominant all year. That's, even for being a one seed, flew under the radar, and Sasser, a senior guard, scoring like 18 a game. He's kind of been their guy. They have a very balanced scoring attack. I think they have 4 or 5 guys that score double digits, but if Sasser plays and Sasser's healthy, that would be my kind of one seed to win it.
Okay. Sharshman, who do you like out of the one seeds?
Wow. I'm going to pivot just because that is the quote unquote region of death. There's a lot of good talent through there. Texas is really hot. So I think Texas over Houston on that side for me. I'm going to pivot and also say the one seed that will not win it is Purdue. I do not trust freshman guards. As Mitch alluded to, veteran experience, don't turn the ball over. Purdue will not win this tournament, but I'm going to pivot and say Kansas, right? And the reason I'm going to say that is veteran guard play. They have Jalen Wilson. He's a bucket getter. He's going to be 20 points guaranteed. But the real thing is they're going to have to rely on Grady Dick to make threes. If he doesn't, they could be sent home early. But in addition, they have the best storyline, right? You need a one seed. You need something to play for. Bill Self. Right? You have your storyline there. Those guys are not going to take, a 16 seed, 8 seed very lightly. So I could see them kind of pivoting and making that run. But I was just talking to someone earlier. Kansas is either going to be that round 2 upset or it's going to be that guaranteed Final Four. I feel like there's really no in between with that team. And we've kind of seen that in years past, right? So obviously they'll have to repeat. But I also do like Alabama making it. I just think they're too good. They're too long. And once again, experienced guard play with Marcus Sears and Quinterly. So
Yeah, I'm with you on Alabama, and that's where I'm going to go with this one. And I think mainly it's because of Brandon Miller. I think he's the best player in college basketball, and I think he's a guy that can lead you to win 6 games in a row. Do we know anything about Self? Is he? Are they kind of calling him done? Is he going to be there?
He's coming back. Yeah, no, he's going to be there. So I think they'll have something to play for. And the reason I don't like Houston to win is just mid-majors just don't win as the one seed usually. Obviously, they have some previous, in the 80s, 90s, but in the last 20 years, mid-majors as a one seed just don't really get it done like a Gonzaga too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm not really on Houston either, but I think part of that is because of the way they got kind of beat up by Memphis in their conference championship game. It kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. But so, okay, we've all got kind of three different picks there. So Mitch Lidke, the Purdue Boilermakers are not on Scharschmidt's radar. He's off the Purdue Boilermakers. Are you with him on that, or are they the 1 seed that you think gets knocked out first?
Yeah, I mean, Mitch kind of hit the nail on the head there with just two freshman guards. You really are going to see them have to grow up quickly to get there. I mean, obviously, Edey's been so dominant, especially down the stretch in the Big Ten tournament. It felt like he was going for 30 and 10 every game.
Yeah.
But you wonder about something that happened in that Penn State game at the end that I think, whether it's Memphis or whether it's FAU, two teams that like really want to pick up the pace and get in your face. What Penn State did to come back against Purdue, I think ultimately is going to be the reason why Purdue ends up losing early, and that's pressing, right? I mean, those freshman guards not having the ability to take care of the ball, I would venture to guess some team is going to press them all game, and that'll ultimately be what kills Purdue. I mean, Edey's awesome. Like I said, he was going for 30 and 10, it felt like, every game last week. But if Memphis or FAU kind of goes to a all game 40 minutes full court press, I could honestly see Purdue losing to that in that 8-9 matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Anything to add there, Mitch?
No, I think, you know, I'm kind of jumping on the bandwagon of everyone else. I think Duke's finally healthy. Just saw a stat that, you know, with their full roster, you know, I think they've only played maybe half the season with their full team, but they're 17-1. I'm not a big believer in the ACC by any means, but I think they're going to ride the wave. And once again, Jeremy Roach, he's going to be a first round point guard, if not this year or next year. So I'm jumping on the Duke bandwagon just because I think they have the athleticism to stop Edey. They're big. I think they got 2 or 3 bigs that are close to 7 feet. So, and they have the number 1 prospect, I think, in Lively. So he's gonna have the athleticism to at least put up a fight against Edey. So they have the size. So I'm glad we don't have to see them potentially until the Elite Eight.
Yeah, it's a tough part of the bracket down there. I'm with you on Purdue. I'm not sold. Being a Badger fan, I got to watch them enough in the Big Ten this year, and Mitch, you touched on it. Edey's fantastic. He's a monster. He's tough to stop. But I don't see them getting even to the Final Four or the Elite Eight. But Mitch, you touched it on it with Houston too. Mid majors, they seem to peter out as the 1 seed, but I think we're in kind of a consensus with the 1 seed and Purdue being knocked out first. Moving on to the 2 seeds, we can move into Marquette now. Obviously, they had a fantastic year. They won the Big East outright. They win the Big East tournament. Mitch Lidke, I'll let you start. What makes this Marquette team special for people that don't watch the Big East and haven't caught many Marquette teams? Give us a rundown of what makes them a 2 seed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we can start with the Big East Player of the Year. And you could make the argument that he may be the best all-around playmaker in college basketball, and that's Tyler Kolek, Big East Player of the Year. I think he was the tournament. You got the tournament player of the tournament as well. His ability to consistently get in the lane with body control, regardless of who's defending him, is something that I don't think last year, I think when Mitch and I, if you go back to our text messages, you would look at our frustration with Kolek. It's just like, it felt like he was never under control, constantly turning over the ball. The growth that he's had to create for others and not turn over is just insanely special. I mean, a kid coming from George Mason who had maybe 1 or 2 Division I scholarships to now arguably a top 3, top 4 point guard in the country. We will go as far as Tyler Kolek takes us. There's obviously a lot of supplemental pieces. Oso's been great. Omax has got, his athleticism's through the roof, can cover just about anyone, but I think this team will go as far as Tyler Kolek carries them.
I don't think he made a floater or a layup last year. Let's just say that. I don't think he made a floater. And now he doesn't miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a big difference if you have a guy that can kind of control the game and put your team in positions to succeed. Mitch, what do you think? How does this Marquette team in particular, stack up against Marquette teams of the past?
It's been dark. I've been watching Wisconsin basketball kind of take over the state here in the last 10 years since 2013, which which is an okay thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're not even competitive or, in the same breath as them, it's a little hard to swallow at night. But I think the big thing with this team that kind of stands out to me the last couple of weeks are those advanced metrics. So when we do play those better teams, a lot of people say, oh, we have those close games, but statistically and metrically speaking, when we play those quad one, UConn, Xavier, our defense actually gets into that upper echelon. So one thing to kind of watch for me in the tournament is, can we still clamp down, or are we going to revert back to those early seasons? So if we're going to give up those easy buckets, if we're not playing hard on defense, we could lose early. Our offense is too good to lose early. It's just going to come down to the defense and if we're making the shots. So that's the difference for me. The Wojo years, we didn't play defense. We didn't care. We basically just chucked threes and just prayed we scored 100 points. So that's the big difference with Shockey. Just kind of infused that natural energy. And for everyone that sort of watched the Big East tournament, I think you saw that. I mean, we blew out Xavier at the end, and it started on the defensive side. Obviously, we were hitting shots, but we also got cold there. But I mean, we built a 21-4 lead, I think it was. So that's the difference for me, is just kind of clamping down on the defensive end and kind of let the offense come to us.
Yeah, you can tell that Shaka Smart's fingerprints are all over this team. If you look back to when he was at VCU and even at Texas, the teams were always solid defensively, and he's brought that in to Marquette as well. So Licky, are you comfortable with Marquette as a 2 seed, or do you think they should have shot up to be a 1 seed after taking the Big East and then the Big East tournament at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much that goes into it logistically based upon lining to regions, different things like that. I think they were probably closer to being a 3 than a 2. That said, I mean, I feel like Marquette's kind of been under the radar for most of the year, right? They started going on their run in the Big East, and I don't know if there was a 1 seed that I could have seen them bumping. I mean, you look at Houston's got 2 losses this year. KU's the best team in the best conference. Purdue beat us and has less losses. So it's just like, I don't know what team they would have bumped. That said, I probably would have been frustrated given the fact that you can make the argument that the Big East is the second best conference in college basketball. And for you to win the conference outright in the regular season and then win the conference tournament, it felt like the 2 seed had to be the floor. So I don't think
I just don't think we had enough good non-conference games. Like if your best win is only Baylor, like name our best win besides Baylor. I mean, you really can't. We don't really have much. Like Notre Dame stunk, Georgia Tech stunk. So 2 seed was, like Mitch said, the 3. We were closer to the 3 than the 1.
Fair. So of the 2 seeds, Marquette being one of them, is there one of the 2 seeds between Arizona, Texas, Marquette, and UCLA that you'd like to make a deep run? Do you think Marquette has the easier route? What do you see out of the 2 seeds, Mitch? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I've been talking so much about guard play, which I think is very important, but then I'm going to spit off something here that's almost the exact opposite of that, because their 2 best players are 7-footers. I think my favorite 2 seed and the interesting 2 seed, and I'm going to say this a little bit blindly because the Pac-12 feels like they play every game at 2 a.m. Central Time and just don't have the ability to stay up that late. But I really love this Arizona team, just to the fact that like they have multiple big guys. If Courtney Ramey or Larson, those guys can take care of the ball. Getting the ball to Bellis or Belo, their 2 7-footers that score 20, 15 a game. Arizona's a really interesting team. I mean, they're going to have to run into Bama, but their size is just so massive at multiple positions that like it becomes problematic, right? I mean, it's different in Purdue sense where they have 1 guy. Arizona has multiple really big dudes that can score. So Arizona's kind of my 2 seed that I feel like if there were a 2 seed to make a long run, it would be Arizona.
Sharshman, are you in that same boat, or do you like one of the other 2 seeds?
I mean, he went against the thought he was preaching with the guard play, and that's exactly kind of what I'm against. I think it's one of the Pac-12 one of the Pac-12 teams lose early, but that other one goes far. I don't know which one it's going to be.
Okay.
But like Lipke said, I just don't think the Pac-12 is very good. We saw Arizona lose a lot of cheapy games to like a Stanford, a Washington State. I'm not saying they're going to be the team, but I think Gonzaga beats UCLA regardless. I think finally Gonzaga, they've been living on this pedestal for a little bit. Now they're flying under the radar. I think with Drew Timme's last year, he's got something to prove. UCLA's got some injury concerns. They lost their defense player. I think their big guy's hurt. Jami Yaquez is going to have to guard Drew Timme, or Anton Watson, or someone off the bench. So Gonzaga is my pick actually to beat UCLA. I just don't think they're going to have anyone to essentially guard those two bigs from Gonzaga. And veteran guard play, Mitch. Bolton's a senior. Strother's been there. And then they also have, I can't think of Salas. So a lot of good guards on Gonzaga, and they are now the #1 efficiency offense in the nation. So I don't think UCLA can score enough with them.
Yeah, and just to add on to something you said about UCLA, I very much like the Zags over UCLA. UCLA played Arizona tough in the Pac-12 championship, which I thought was interesting. But the thing for me for UCLA is Jalen Clark is by far their best two-way player. And the fact that they don't have him in the tournament, you're putting a lot of pressure on Jaquez and Tiger Campbell to basically carry the load. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how UCLA plays with, I would say arguably, I mean, Tennessee lost, what's his name? That's a pretty big injury, but UCLA's loss of Jalen Clark may be the single-handedly biggest loss for any team for their ability to make a run.
Yeah, you're talking about a team that lives and breathes on defense, who's like top 10 and who grinds out 60-point games. And you're going to take away, roughly, 15 to 25% of their scoring and their defense.
Yeah.
Like I said, Yaquez is going to have to play defense now, and he scores the most. He almost scores 20 out of their 60 a game. I think it's just an easy saying, like UCLA is going down to Gonzaga. They just can't score enough.
Yeah. And the Zags are kind of on a heater too, right? They just kind of, they beat up on St. Mary's, I think 2 games in a row to end the year, and then in their conference championship. So it seems like the Zags, and you mentioned it with Timme, this is his last year. I mean, do we think he's an NBA player? You guys think he's got a shot at the NBA, or do you think he's done at the end of college here?
Doesn't he have an extra free COVID year? I know he's a senior, but he technically, I think, could come back next year.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We're gonna have to circle back on that, but I thought for sure he would shoot more threes this year, Mitch, and I don't think he tried. So, but circling back to the 2 seeds, Texas is mine.
Okay,
they're coming in hot. Obviously Marquette has a nice little road, so we'll see. I mean, another big stat I like to kind of follow is, who turns the ball over the most and who doesn't. And I was looking at the metrics, average Final Four team turning the ball over. Marquette's on that upper echelon. So if we're not turning the ball over, I think we have a really good chance at making it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point on Texas. I watched their game against Kansas in the Big 12 championship, and they kind of did whatever they wanted. It seemed like they kind of got everything that they were looking for offensively, and Kansas just didn't have enough to keep up with them. So I think that would be a really interesting matchup between Texas, and if it got to that point, either UCLA or Gonzaga. I think that would be a good game between either of those two.
Let's not forget Marcus Carr's 24 on Texas.
Yeah.
So I mean, you talk about a veteran guard.
Yes.
24 years old.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So we talked about the top seeds. Let's move down a little bit. If there's a 5 seed or lower, which one do you think has the best chance to make a run to the Final Four, or is the most equipped to make a run at the Final Four?
Yeah, 5 seed or lower. Well, they're not a 5, so I'm kind of cheating. I do think that this
classic bending the rules. Bending the rules of the game.
Right. Go for it.
It's a slight move. Well, I will say the other team. So I think that this bracket that I'm about to bring up, the other team that I kind of like as a dark horse is TCU, but I think UConn's a 4. And the reason I say that is UConn, and we saw it in non-conference, and I also feel like this is a trendy pick that a lot of people are kind of picking up on. It's so dependent on whatever Hawkins shows up. I think UConn arguably could be the best team in college basketball if Hawkins is playing the way he did earlier in the year, and then there was a spurt in the latter part of the Big East. I mean, he didn't play well against Marquette in the semis.
Yeah. My problem is they don't have a point guard. If you put Tyler Kolek on that team, I'd pick them, but I don't trust Tristan Newton. That's sorry. I just had to say it.
No,
they just don't have a point guard. I don't trust Tristan Newton.
I hear you, but I will say the other team that I mentioned there. So that bracket is, I feel like, the best bracket to have a non-3 seed come out. And the other team I like, and I know that they just lost Lampkin, but we talk about really good guards. TCU is a team that I feel like is kind of going under the radar a little bit. They're coming out of the Big 12, so they're obviously battle tested. But between Miles Jr., Emmanuel Miller, and Damon Ball, that's a team that I feel like could very much go on a run.
Sure.
Mitch, what do you think? I don't disagree. I just had to get it in there. If you put Tyler Kolek on UConn, that'd be my pick. Any point guard. I'm just saying right now, that's the only thing that's scaring me away from UConn is the point guard. Like if Andre Jackson could run point, I think I would pick UConn to win it all. They're just that good. Or if Danny Hurley would just play Klingon over Sonogo sometimes. But I got to play by the rules, Mitch. I got to pick someone over 4 seed. I already said Duke, so I'll pivot. I think Creighton. Last year, they took Kansas. That was like Kansas's toughest game last year. Was that Creighton game? They returned everybody. I think their biggest thing is not letting the Baylor guards beat them, but also, to Mitch's point, those bigs on Arizona. And I think that's a really good matchup for Creighton of Kalkbrenner kind of getting in the way. Obviously, Tubelis is kind of the X factor, but I think Creighton's guards are better than Arizona. So I think Creighton could get to Elite Eight. I don't know if they could beat Bama though, but I think if you're looking for a 6 seed that could kind of, at least get to Elite Eight and fringe Final Four, it's Creighton for me. I don't really like any of the other really higher seeds. There is, I think last year when we saw UNC be that 8 seed, obviously for the Marquette fans, we went fuck, right? Awful matchup for us. I'm like, great. We get UNC and they're going to make a run to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight. I just don't really see that power kind of sitting in the 8-9 right now. Like Iowa, for instance, they could potentially get hot, but I only think it's for one weekend. Like they could catch fire and rain threes and get to the Sweet 16. But those 8-9 matchups, I mean, Illinois, Arkansas, they've been a roller coaster all year. That's kind of how the 8 and 9 seeds kind of live. But I don't know, Mitch, who are you liking for those upset picks? You got Furman, Charleston. Who are you liking gets to the Sweet 16 there?
Yeah. So you mentioned it, which I feel like not a lot of people are talking about, right? Like I know we're gonna dive into some upsets here. I feel like Oral Roberts seems to be, and it's funny because they're playing Duke. I feel like it was a very trendy pick, but it feels like Oral Roberts is like a 12 seed that people are talking about. Charleston's a 12 seed that people are talking about because they've won 30 games. But you mentioned it, and it's, for me, I feel like no one's talking about Furman, and Furman is a team that got super hot late. I mean, you look at their schedule, there's nothing that jumps out about them outside of the fact that they have a guard that scores 20 a game and has proven that he can go off. I think he has 3 or 4 games. His name's Mike Bothwell. He's a senior guard who has like 3 or 4 games where he scored like 35 this year. Especially the fact that they're playing a Virginia team that one just lost Ripon native Ben Vanderplas, but Virginia is just a common team that I feel like is upset, kind of like always on upset alert because they don't score, right? They want to beat you 48-40. So if Mike Bothwell can get hot and go off for 30 like he's proven in the past, Furman feels like a team that could go on a run there. And if they run into a fact that Charleston found a way to win that 5-12 matchup, now you have Furman and Charleston where, give me Furman. So it's funny that you mentioned it because that was very much the 13 seed that I feel like has a chance to go to Sweet 16. Yeah,
and I just recently looked at the scoreboard. Arizona State's already up 10 on Nevada, so I feel bad for the Badger fans that, if we would have just squeaked out a win, they'd be in that matchup tonight.
Stay away from Mountain West. Do never bet on Mountain West.
Yeah, they don't seem to do well in the tournament, that's for sure. So nobody interested in the Wildcats of Kentucky with Calipari. Neither of you guys are on the Wildcats.
This feels like a Cal legacy tournament, right? I mean, Kentucky kind of pivoting a bit because they've been so used to, and not saying Coach Cal isn't a good coach, don't get me wrong, he is, but like he was so used to just stacking all Americans on his team. because of the transfer portal. Like you had to sit out a year, so it just kept people sticking around. And when injuries happened or they got in foul trouble, they could just bring in the next McDonald's All-American. Where it's like the transfer portal has almost pivoted the way Coach Cal has been able to coach. So honestly, I feel like this very much could be a Kentucky team that goes on a run just because it feels like Cal kind of needs it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mitch. What do you think about the Wildcats?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, I'm going to have to review my bracket sheet a little bit after watching some of these games. It seems like the refs are going to make it a free throw contest. Obviously, Bryce Hopkins is a really good player, but I've watched him kind of struggle at the free throw line. But I just think Coach Cal kind of grinds this one out. Providence has been reeling here the last couple months. They haven't really beat anyone in like the top 50 RPI, maybe since us or someone else. But I just think Providence, they're not the same team. They kind of you talk about a home ref situation, it's at the dunk. So I just like Kentucky to kind of grind it out, but really have to look at who can shoot free throws.
Yeah.
Because I know Mississippi State didn't lose on free throws last night, but I know they came in as one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the nation. So there's something to look out for that too.
Yeah, in that first game, the 16 seed, I think there was like 55 free throw shot in that game.
Yeah.
Like, just absurd. And
it was wild.
I also think if that's the case, and it's proven to be that way in the past, that just does not bode well for the Big Ten again, because the way the Big Ten plays is just, very physical, slow the game down. And if the NCAA is going to pivot and start calling a lot of that, bully ball type thing, that doesn't bode well for the Big Ten.
Yeah. And quickly on Kentucky, 233rd in college basketball and free throw percentage, just above 70%. So not great if you're looking at the Wildcats to make a run to the Final Four.
I still think Kentucky wins that game though. I don't. What do you think, Mitch? I don't think Bryce Hopkins can't guard Oscar, and Croswell's not that athletic. So I think Oscar should dominate that game for Kentucky.
And not to mention, you have a coach in Providence that may have his mind elsewhere. I mean, if Georgetown just said, hey, what is it going to take you to get you to leave? If I had a 25, 30, 40, $50 million offer sitting on the table, I don't know if I'd be thinking about prep for Coach Cal. I would be thinking about, hey, that's a lot of money. So that's another kind of interesting thing. And that's not in Providence's corner right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Let's look at another set of teams that could potentially bow out early. I know we talked about the one seeds. Is there another one or two teams that are seeded maybe 1 through 4 that you don't have any confidence in? I know you touched quickly on Virginia, and that was one of the teams that I had thought about too. But I'm looking at a team like Tennessee that I think could bow out early. Mitch Licky, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a kind of fair assessment, but we touched on it a little bit, and this really doesn't make sense. And this is more of just like me going into the madness, because I feel like there's things that happens obviously every year that no one can predict. So it's more so just on, and I touched on it earlier, the Clark injury. I don't know if Boise State can get past Northwestern. So I kind of have Northwestern as this interesting team just because they have 2 really good guards. And I don't think the Big Ten fares well. But that said, I just don't know what UCLA team's going to show up. And if this becomes a game where Jaquez is going to have to score 25, 30 a game, I feel like Northwestern has guys they can throw at him. And if Boo Buie and others go off, that may be the 2 seed to lose first in a game that, like I said, I don't trust the Big Ten, but for some reason, Northwestern sitting there, I feel like Northwestern has had this magical run this year that I could see Collins kind of getting them to the Sweet 16 for probably the first time in who knows how long.
Yeah. Quick note on Northwestern before we move on to you, Mitch. 20-1 this year when they hold their opponents to 65 points or less. So it seems like if you can get to 65 against Northwestern, you get a really good chance. Boise State has 5 guys that average 10 points a game this year. So I think that's an interesting matchup. But Northwestern kind of struggling down the stretch, lost 4 of their last 5. So they kind of limped into the tournament. Might be a tough way to start for them. Sharshmit, who do you like out of the top 4 seeds to kind of bow out early?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and go up one. I'm going to go up 1 seed since Licky's been on that. I think VCU is actually a very intriguing option over St. Mary's. Very athletic guards. when we think of the West Coast Conference, not as athletic. VCU is still kind of running that old Shaka mantra of just athleticism, kind of just that tenacity. So Aiden Mahoney, freshman, very talented, but also his first time being in the tournament. So VCU maybe being a little bit battle tested here over the last couple of years could do that. Really wish Iona wasn't with UConn. I think Iona could have done some damage if seeded against some other seeds. I just don't see that happening with UConn. I'm always going to look for guard play. And that's why, you said Tennessee right away. And I agree with that. You take away, like if you took Tyler Kolek away from us, we were a 3 or 4 seed, I'd be picking against us. So that's my mindset with Tennessee. So take away a point guard who's running the ship, almost as good as Tyler Kolek. I think Louisiana is someone to look at. I think Xavier, too old. I don't see them being upset. Indiana's another one. Mitch watched more Big Ten play for him than me this year, so maybe he knows a little bit more about Indiana's guards than me. But I think they're more of a power forward, big guy team. So Kent State could do some damage there. In addition,
Mitch, you wanna touch on Indiana at all since Schwarzman brought it up?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fair point. Indiana just kind of funnels through Trace Jackson and I don't know. They're an interesting team. I also feel like that they have they're probably the most athletic, maybe outside of Illinois, but they're also the maybe most athletic Big Ten team that doesn't traditionally play the whole kind of like very slow pace. I feel like Indiana has the ability to kind of get out and be athletic with some of the other teams. So Indiana is a really big wild card for me.
More of the story is we don't trust the Big Ten.
Fair.
Like
Very
the
fair.
only team I started to trust is Michigan State, just because I think Pac-12 is even worse. Like the other teams that got in besides UCLA and Arizona, I don't trust. So that's why I'm with Michigan State.
Okay. Yeah, let's touch on Michigan State. I was surprised to see when I did a little bit of research on the Spartans. Tom Izzo actually pretty good in the first round. See if I can find my quick notes here. I'm not at the moment, but I know Michigan State, they had kind of an up and down year. They shot the ball really well from 3 this year, which I think can get you in a spot where you can kind of beat anybody. But if you're not making threes, obviously you can get beat by anybody. Any thoughts on them potentially making a run, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, that matchup is so interesting to me, right? We talk about not being able to ever watch the Pac-12. That said, Boogie Ellis is an incredible guard for USC. I don't know if with Michigan State, Izzo being so good in March, I really don't know if they can get by USC, just given how good Boogie Ellis is. He strikes me as a guy that can absolutely take over a game. And if you look on the other side of the court, does Michigan State really have a guy that can take over the game? And I don't know if the answer to that question is yes. So that said, I feel like from a Marquette standpoint, I would much rather play USC just because no one wants to play Tom Izzo in March. But I don't know if Michigan State gets by USC.
I actually wanted to play Michigan State. Little fun fact for you, but they're 300th in turnover margin. And guess what Marquette does very well? Forces turnovers. Yeah. So Tom Izzo, first time in a while where his team's not very tidied up. He's gonna have to call up Greg Gard.
Give us the Joey Hauser revenge game too.
Yeah, I also want to see Joey Hauser. I want some revenge on him.
Fair. Were you guys surprised to see him leave Marquette and go to Michigan State?
I don't know. There was
no.
Yeah.
One word, no.
Yeah, there was some stuff going on there. I think that when Wojo was recruiting Joey and Sam, he had basically promised them that Marcus would kind of leave early. I don't know if that was, I mean, he was always small, but I think that the plan was that Joey and Sam were going to take over pretty early on and weren't going to have to deal with Marcus shooting the ball 40 times a game. And when Marcus decided to come back that last year, I think Sam and Joey were like, I don't want to just be this guy that gets 5, 6, 7 shots a game because everything is just running through ISO ball for Marcus. So I think that once that happened, they were both out of there.
Fair. Fair. Okay. Yeah. Let's keep going here. We've touched on a bunch of teams. Licky, I'll let you start on this one. Is there a player or two on a specific team that you think can get hot and can really push their team to potentially an Elite Eight or a Final Four run?
Yeah, and I touched on a little bit earlier, and I know they don't have the true point guard that me and Mitch look for, but Hawkins to me is a guy that's been so up and down this year for UConn, where on games where he plays, like he's going to be a lottery pick. There's a solid chance he goes in the top 10. And when you have a guy like that on a seed that's, not a 1 seed, not a 2 seed, not these like power seeds, that if Hawkins can get hot, they can beat anyone in the country. So I will say I'll stick with that. That I think UConn will go as far as Hawkins takes them.
I agree. Mitch took the words out of my mouth. He's the best pure shooting guard, I think, in the nation. Best pure scoring guard is Hawkins. I think he can definitely carry a team. Yeah, outside of the 1 seeds, man. Drew Timmy. I mean, he's done it before. Why can't he do it again? So that's probably my pick. I was going to say Jalen Wilson for Kansas, but that's cheating.
What about one of Baylor's studs?
I was going to pivot to our conference and say Soli Boom.
Yeah.
I think Boom could easily carry Xavier. They could upset Texas. I don't think so. But I think Soli Boom is that player that could literally average 24, 25 a game. I think the same goes with Chase Jackson for Indiana too. I mean, he could easily put up 24 a game. And then Wong for Miami. I think is another guy that could go off. But like you said, Mitch, Keontae George, another lottery pick. Problem is though, they have too many guards to feed, and I think that kind of gets in Baylor's way a little bit. When you have LJ Cryer, George, and Flagler, you got to feed all those mouths. So I think that kind of hurts Baylor a little bit just because they can't feed everyone at the same time. So that's why I picked Creighton over Baylor, just because of the size difference too. Trey Alexander has NBA with Kaluma, Doge, Fireman, and then Cockrunner. So I think Creighton's defense, is just going to eat them up.
Okay, fair. I want to quickly touch on Brandon Miller because I think that he's a guy that's I'm more of an NBA guy myself, so I pay attention more to college basketball at the end of the year. So I kind of picked it up when football stopped, and that was right around when Brandon Miller was kind of going through his legal issues, and I thought that might have been a hindrance to him in that Alabama team, but he seemed to pick it up and kind of run with it. He came back and has been hot ever since, and he obviously pushed them to a 1 seed. What do you guys think of Miller? It sounds like he's brought himself up to potentially a top 3 pick in the NBA draft coming up this year.
Yeah, I mean, he talent-wise, he's absolutely through the roof. Like you said, he's probably has the highest ceiling out of anyone in college basketball. But you have to wonder. I saw today that he has like and it sucks that it's this point, and he's obviously dealing with a lot, and I'll avoid getting into all the legal stuff, but I saw today now that he has to carry bodyguards around with him because of like some of the like direct messages and stuff that he's getting, where it's just one of those things where it's like at some point all of that noise has to take an emotional toll, right? You have to lose the ability to lock in, and if he can go through all of this and make this run, all of those kind of things, I'm sure some team will hope that he has, gone down the right path and gotten that friend group like out of him and all of those kind of things. That said, you just wonder how much like all of this happening at such a young age can take a toll on you to the point where either you continue heading down the wrong path, or, I mean, it's just, there's so much going on for an 18, 19-year-old kid that you just wonder, like, at what point does it become too much?
Yeah. Anything to add, Sharchman?
Not just veteran guard play for Bama, just lean on the veteran guard. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, very fair. Okay. So we've touched on a couple of different conferences, and you guys have mentioned a few. Which major conference are you guys looking to fade this year, at least in the first couple rounds? And I'll quickly run through it. The Big Ten's got 9 teams, the Big 12, 7, the Atlantic Coast, 7, the Southeastern Conference, 6, Pac-12 has 5 and the Big East has 4. Any of those big conferences that you're not really interested in putting money on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the low-hanging fruit's the Big Ten, but I will pivot away and I'll say the ACC. I mean, outside of Duke, I don't know if there's another team that has the ability to go on a run. I mean, Miami has Wong, he's kind of has the veteran guard thing that we talked about. But I mean, Miami is going to have Miami, you could make the argument that Miami has arguably the hottest 12 seed in Drake, the way Drake ran through their Missouri Valley Conference tournament. So I'll pivot and say the ACC solely because I think that there's really only one team that has the ability to make it to the second weekend, and that's probably Duke.
Yeah, quick note on Duke, really young team this year with Duke, right? They played a lot of freshmen. I think you kind of saw that early in the year. They kind of started a little rough. Obviously, they've got a brand new coach, a new head coach, anyways. But yeah, really the young team, but they've really rounded into form as of late. What do you think, Sharshman? Any conferences that you're staying away from?
Yeah, I'll even pivot away from the Big Ten like he did, and I'll say the SEC. I mean, outside of Bama,
Yep.
I don't see any noise really kind of happening. I mean, Kentucky doesn't have that, Devin Booker, Anthony Davis to kind of carry the team. They don't have really anyone besides Oscar, and he can't really do it unless he gets the ball in the post.
Right.
Not really buying Texas A&M, home-based team. And the reason they got the 7th seed is our old friend Buzz Williams had one of the worst non-conference schedules in the nation. So kind of pivoting away from the SEC, don't really see much happening. Like Arkansas, I don't see them getting past Kansas. Obviously that 8-9 can happen. But once again, Arkansas is a super young team. Don't have veteran guards, had a lot of injuries, don't really have that natural cohesion. And with the Arkansas teams we've seen in past, they always had some veteran leadership. We just saw Jalen Williams go to first round to OKC. I think if they brought him back, we would have seen that jump from Arkansas to like an 8 to a 4 seed. So I'm just really not buying much from the SEC. I think if Ziegler from Tennessee would have never gotten hurt, Tennessee could have been a dark horse out of that region to make the Final Four, but I'm just not seeing it with the SEC this year.
Yeah, fair. And you guys being Marquette fans, you know a lot about the Big East. I mean, we've touched on them a couple times. So you guys are pretty fond of the Big East. You guys think they perform well at least early in the tournament?
Yeah, I think that the Big East has been so top heavy that the top 4 teams I think all have a legit shot to take a run. I mean, Mitch talked on about Bohm for Xavier, he could carry them. Even Creighton at the 6. I mean, Creighton's a very talented team. We talked about UConn potentially being one of the best teams in college basketball when Hawkins is going, and obviously Marquette's kind of was able to like almost lap the Big East in the sense that they won it by 2 full games. So I very much would put the top of the Big East, that top 3-4 teams, to align with anyone else's top, and that includes the Big 12. The Big 12 was obviously by far more deep, but I mean, you put the top 4 of the Big East against the top 4 of the Big 12, and I don't think it's all that much of a Big 12's head and shoulders better. I mean, obviously KU, Texas, those teams are really good, but I mean 3, 4, 5, you're talking UConn, Creighton, Xavier in comparison to like the K-State, TCU. I don't think that there's that much difference. So, if there is a conference to really show out, I could see it being the Big East.
Yeah, and I'm piggybacking off that. I'm interested to see that because there are some natural, top 4 matchups kind of, living in each region. We have Marquette, Kansas State that have a potential matchup. We have Creighton, Baylor. We have UConn, Kansas, and then we also have Texas, Xavier. So we have 4 very potential matchups to kind of, see where we rank by conference to that level. The only team I'm kind of fading though is Providence. I don't see that. I think SEC kind of pounds us there.
Sure. And Marquette matched up with Baylor early in their non-conference schedule, right? And I believe Marquette got the win there. It wasn't even a very close game, was it? If I remember correctly.
No, we shot the absolute lights out. I think we won by 25, 26, but it was one of those games where obviously we have the talent and stuff, but I think we shot literally like 60% from 3. That game was ridiculous. It just felt like every shot was falling. So, but yeah,
you could say that was the most important game for Marquette this year.
Oh, yeah.
It could have been the turning point to, this young team gaining confidence, obviously we have the Big East title. That game's super important. But I think if you look back and really find out where we kind of, figured ourselves out, it's probably the Baylor game.
And to your point, right, that single game may have caused Marquette to jump 2 seed lines. Even winning the Big East,
Sure.
if you lose to Baylor, that you don't have a single good non-conference win. The committee kind of proved that you needed to play some opponents in the non-conference. That could have been the reason why Marquette would have gotten a 4 if they would have lost to Baylor.
Sure.
I agree.
Okay. Awesome. But yeah, I think you're right in saying that the Big Ten is kind of the low hanging fruit from a conference perspective, mainly just because they have so many teams. But it was, even though Purdue kind of won the Big Ten outright by a few games, I think it was once we got down the stretch, it seemed like it was kind of jumbled the rest of the way. There wasn't really a team that kind of, stuck their neck out and kind of challenged Purdue, even though they did have a couple losses in the conference schedule. It didn't seem like there was any team that really stuck out and could give Purdue a run for their money. So I want to talk about, because the tournament is such a big betting opportunity. I want to talk about some betting trends, because there's so much history to look back on. Mitch, when you kind of look at the tournament, is there anything that you can point to from maybe a tips perspective or some kind of stat that stood out to you when people are looking at potentially betting on some of these games?
I don't know if it's so much these games, but I will say this: I'm an emotional hedger. So, when people hear me see like, "Hey, you're a Marquette guy," if anyone asks where I have Marquette going in my bracket, I think I have them losing in the second round just because I'm a strong proponent of emotional hedging. So, that said, the one thing that I noticed this year, maybe more so in years past, and this just speaks to the parity in college basketball, is the lines seem to be getting closer and closer. You look at a lot of the 4-13s, 5-12s, like those lines are like 5-6 points, where it felt like in years past, those lines were pretty close to 9, 10, 11. I mean, even the 1-16s, there have been years in the past where it felt like lines were like 30, like like Zags played like Southern, it was like 31-32. I think the biggest line this year is what, 23 or 24, whatever. I think it might be the Bama game. So that just speaks to the parity in college basketball, and I think Vegas is very much preparing that there could be a lot of madness in this tournament because of how much the gap between the top and the bottom is getting closer together.
Fair. And a quick point on, if we look at the round of 64, and specifically, since the tournament expanded to 64, that was in 1985. I thought this was really interesting. Underdogs in the first round, 292 and 874. That's 25% straight up in the round of 64. So people love to talk about upsets and the madness in the tournament. There really isn't that many upsets in the first round. So you got to kind of pick and choose where you think teams can get upset, if you want to pick a good bracket, at least early. Sharshman, anything stick out to you from an angle like that?
I forgot what the percentage or the metrics were saying, but the first 4 games, one of those 11 seeds usually wins the first game. And this year I didn't. But now seeing Arizona State play so well, I might be up tonight at 1 a.m. kind of going back, clicking back and forth on my bracket. Like, do I go Arizona State now? Because, obviously I love TCU though. The problem is it's TCU. I really like TCU. I wish Arizona State was playing Iowa State just because of some of the stuff they've been going on. They had to dismiss a player, stuff like that. I don't believe in Pitt, so I'm still taking Iowa State just because it's ACC. Another thing I'm going to throw out there that I was kind of reading earlier is time zone. We need to take into account the Western teams coming to the East Coast. So back to Mitch about USC and Michigan State, they're playing on the East Coast. They're starting at 11:15. That's a 9:15 game in the morning. Is that enough time to get them acclimated? Same thing with my BCU pick over St. Mary's. That game's at 1. That's really 11 a.m. and St. Mary's is used to playing at 2 a.m. Central Time. So a lot of the things I'm looking at too is, these kids are 20 years old. When I was a 20-year-old kid, I couldn't even make it to a 9:55 class. So just looking at weird things like time zones and stuff like that, I know I'm digging. But I didn't think about the lines like Mitch. When he brought it up, I wanted to go look at it. And yeah, it's definitely, there's some tightening up of those games. I'm just looking right now, like 6-11, it's only like 4 points, like Mitch said. So I don't really have any betting stuff, so I'm just going to throw out some time zone stuff. Those kids it's gonna be tough to wake up in the morning.
Yeah, they probably don't even have time to have their C4 smart energies by that
Yeah.
point. So you just gotta wonder, no caffeine in
Yeah.
the system. It's just, it's a great point.
Well, and it's very important to note that too, if you are looking at betting games or touching some of the totals in those games, can those guys get up and can they have their bodies ready to get out and compete? And so if you're looking at potentially over-unders in those games where teams are going east or coming out west, you probably want to lean unders in those games. Obviously, do your research, but if guys are used to playing late, like those West Coast teams, and they're coming out east and playing early in the morning on their clock, are they ready to get up and shoot the basketball, consistently? Something to pay attention to. I did, since I brought up the first round, like I mentioned, the tournament expanded in 1985, but if we look a little bit more recently, since 2015, underdogs in the first round, 122, 97, and 2 against the spread. So a little bit more favorable if you're looking at betting teams, underdogs at least, against the spread. That's about 55.5%. So a little bit more favorable. Now, another quick one, double digit underdogs. This is really interesting. 507, 507, and 21 against the spread, literally even since 1985. So double digit underdogs since 1985, even against the spread. So you pretty much hit or miss.
Yeah, and a couple things still with time zones. We're still there, and then we're gonna bring regions into play now. One thing I did not know: 9-8 game, Auburn, Iowa. I was big on Iowa. It's actually that 9 games actually being played in Alabama for Auburn. So home court advantage much. So if you're kind of looking to, make those, edge line picks, make sure you're looking at the region. Same thing with Charleston, San Diego State. That's in Florida. San Diego State's got to come all the way over to the other side of the map. Charleston might have some fans there. So some more things to look at is looking by region. Illinois is playing Arkansas in Iowa, Des Moines. So some of these 8-9 matchups that would think would be a little bit more might be swayed a little bit by region, and I didn't think those 8-9 games would be really.
Yeah, and you can look at too, how did those teams fare in true road games too, because that could be what some of these games turn out to be.
Is that a true road game though? If Auburn's playing in Birmingham, Alabama for Iowa?
So what I mean is then the opposite way. So if I was playing in Alabama, how did they fare in true road games versus playing at home or in neutral site games? So that's something it's a good point, something to keep in mind.
We got region, we got time zones. I think I'm ready to take the ACT geography portion.
Hey, I don't bet on games. So I'm just trying to find any specific metric that we can kind of, give somebody the edge.
Or numbers guys,
numbers guy.
So I think something to keep in mind, kind of piggybacking off of other things to pay attention to, are coaches, some of the big time coaches that have a lot of experience. You look at teams like Purdue, West Virginia, Kansas, Iowa, and Iona, frankly, with Pitino. Some of these teams do have really experienced coaches. And if you're getting into a matchup where teams have less experienced coaches, that can be an edge as well. And something to keep in mind. I thought this was a really impressive stat since we touched on Purdue and how none of us are really all that confident in Purdue. Matt Painter in the first round of the tournament, 11-3 against the spread. So really solid choice to go with Purdue if you're looking at history with their games against the spread in their first round.
Yeah, I don't think he gets his flowers enough. Honestly, Matt Painter's a really good coach, and if Robbie Hummel never messes up his knee, that could have been his team that finally got him over the hump. So I think that's one guy if you're looking at that probably doesn't get enough credit, especially like with Izzo. But Izzo only has that one title. So, I mean, if Painter would have got that one title, I think you could have, maybe not that high, but as close to Izzo as you can get.
Yeah. And Mitch, any other coaches that you're interested in keeping an eye on? I know we mentioned I think was it the Providence coach that it's looking at potentially moving over to Georgetown next year. Anyone else that you're interested in keeping your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, and this might be just piggybacking off of some of the part of my take guys comments, but wouldn't it be funny if John Shire in his first year at Duke ends up taking Duke on this like magical run, and you start the whole rumors of like, well, and he's obviously got a long ways to go, but it's just like, you start to wonder if the program's almost just winning, and it's like, if Shire ends up doing really well, it's, they start attacking. Not that Coach K's legacy would be attacked, but I just think it's interesting, right? You have Duke, who's a team that a lot of people are talking about going on a run. I think it would be super interesting, given the fact that Coach K went out last year against North Carolina, and it would be hilarious if John Shire comes in his first year and ends up, making a run on to the title game. So,
yeah, let's not forget Shaka hasn't won a game since his VCU days too. So, you want a little nerves for the Marquette fandom? Right there it is.
Yeah, because his belly's going to be buzzing a little bit when he gets the shoot, or when he gets the polo on and he's got the team ready to go. Either of you guys any interest in Izzo with Iona? You guys think that they've got any kind of chance? I know they're matched up with UConn, but what do you think out of Pitino's squad with Iona?
Yeah, it's such a tough matchup for them because I'm so high on UConn. I think it could very much be a fun game, but I think the interesting thing will be is what happens after the tournament for Pitino. I think he's like built a pretty solid program at Iona to the point. Does he get his next big kind of power 5, power 6 shot? I mean, there's been rumors actually in the Big East. I think St. John's has been rumored to try to bring him back. So I definitely think Pitino's coaching his way into another power 5, power 6 job though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think St. John's is probably the play. He mentioned he only wants to coach for 4 or 5 more years. So I think St. John's has to make that move. Just try your best to kind of somehow get it back to relevancy and kind of, you get the recruits now, and hopefully you can find a solid coach to make that move after Pitino leaves. So I agree with Mitch. I think another interesting one is kind of Illinois. Underwood's kind of built this team mantra over the last couple of years. They've been good. They've had some runs in the Big Ten, and they haven't really performed that well. I have some buddies who are big Illinois fans, and he just kind of is. Yeah, he gets the talent, and they just kind of leave. So I'm interested to see if Illinois loses to Arkansas, and if that seat gets a little hotter for him at Illinois.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and it's a tough matchup with Arkansas, and even if they do win, they likely get Kansas. So you think they're kind of, the road is pretty tough there to get past the second round.
Correct.
Okay, so I want to get some Final Four picks from you guys, but before we do that, any other interesting matchups that you want to touch on? Maybe an upset that you're looking at?
I mean, the one I mentioned earlier would be Furman to the Sweet 16. I'm just going to ride it. I think that there will be some area where you have 2 double-digit seeds going, whether it's a 12 and a 13, 11 and a 14, something along those lines will happen. So I have kind of my boldest prediction is Furman to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I just don't have enough guts to do it. I just, I passed accountant. I, live very not on the edge. I wish I could have done Drake Kent State. I think that's a great opportunity, like Mitch said, for 2 double-digit seeds to upset. I only see 2 brackets kind of having it. It's the top 2. I see, the Kent State for Drake, or I see the Charleston Furman. I don't really think any upsets. I think Duke's too good. Too big. My thing is Duke's too big for Oral Roberts. And then on the other side of the bracket, I just don't see, the rest of those teams losing. So I like the top of the bracket to have the upset. I don't really have any 8 seeds kind of doing it. I mean, Iowa, now that I know Iowa's actually in Alabama, that kind of takes away, my Iowa over Houston pick. So I don't really have anything big in that way. So I wish UNC would have made it as a 7th seed, because I would have picked them.
Yeah. Fair.
The more I look at my bracket, the more it probably logically doesn't make sense. So like, we talk a lot about how Gonzaga is super good, and I agree, but I'm like, well, I really like TCU to go to the Elite 8, so I might as well take Grand Canyon over Gonzaga. Like, that's just kind of how my thought process works. So I have Grand Canyon
You're hedging. You're just hedging.
Yeah,
It's,
emotional
yeah,
hedging.
it's just, hey, let's just throw some things on the board and see what happens.
I'm kind of with Mitch though. I could see either or, Boise State or Northwestern beating UCLA. I think that's the one that the committee's kind of always been on the thing of like, oh, we're going to take into account of injuries, kind of move someone down a seed. We want like Robbie Hummel year. I think they were supposed to get a 1. They put them as a 2. So I thought for sure, obviously UCLA deserved it. But I think a lot of people don't realize how good that Jalen Clark was. So I'm with Mitch there. I'm jumping on that bandwagon. If we see a big upset, I think it's Northwestern or Boise State over UCLA.
Okay. Yeah, no, neither of you guys are high on UCLA, and it makes sense since they've got some issues from a health perspective. So I thought the Furman matchup with Virginia was an interesting one because it's a real contrast in styles. Like we mentioned, Virginia likes to slow you down, kind of grind out games, whereas Furman averages over 82 points a game. So a real big contrast in styles. That could be an interesting one to get matched up with. And that San Diego State against Charleston matchup is interesting too. San Diego State is really good defensively. They only allow about 63 points a game. Whereas Charleston, they've had quite the season. They went 31-3, and they've won 20 in a row. They won 20 in a row at one point this year, but they've won their last 10. So a team that's really playing well coming into the tournament in Charleston. So that's an interesting matchup on that side of the bracket as well. All right, so Litke, give me your teams to make the Final Four. Who do you think gets there?
So I have Arizona, Duke, Houston, and UConn. Those are kind of my 4 teams. And I think, right, we talk about like upsets happening, all that kind of stuff, but I think it's just a safe bet that like all of those Cinderella stories at some point come to an end. And if you look at the last, however many years of Final Fours, it's just predominantly all the top 4 seeds. I mean, there's like, right, North Carolina last year going on that run, but they were obviously super talented. So I went, a 1, a 2, a 4, and a 5.
Fair. What do you think, Mitch?
I'm going Bama, Texas, Kansas, and Duke.
Okay.
Duke. My gut says Marquette, but my brain says Duke.
Emotional hedge.
It's an emotional hedge. I do have I will say I'm a big Marquette homer. I have never, ever picked them in my lifespan to win the tournament. But this year I did create a separate bracket where they did win it.
Okay.
I will say
That's
that
fair.
I had to put one down.
Okay.
I think the last, like, outside of, I was too young. I wasn't making brackets when I was 8 years old in 2003. But past that Buzz Williams era, never picked them to win. Never picked them to make the Final Four. Maybe or the championship game, never to win. It was always just Sweet 16. And I just, like Mitch, we're done. Just get to the Sweet 16. I'll be happy.
I learned my lesson from not emotionally hedging when the Packers played the Lions in week 17, where I thought there was absolutely no shot that we were losing that game. So I was all in, kind of double pulling, obviously, for my team and betting on them. And I realized that low is by far lower than any other sport feeling, that I will very much avoid that going forward.
Sure.
The last thing I'll say is I might be up till 1 a.m. again because Arizona State is now up 27 points, and you cannot teach momentum like that. So watch out, TCU, Mitch. Watch out.
Yeah. So you guys talked about how you didn't actually pick Marquette. I want to know if you actually believe that they could win the national championship. And Licky, I'll let you start.
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, even the games that they've lost this year to some of the elite teams, right? Purdue being a 1 seed, all the teams that they lost to in the Big East outside of the UConn game, they were all like a possession or 2 games. So I do think that they will have the opportunity in every game. That's me saying I don't think that there is going to be a team they face in this tournament that it's going to be a blowout. They don't have a chance. It's just not Shaka's attitude. When they get down, he adjusts so well and comes back, which is just so different from being a Marquette fan, knowing that like Wojo's teams, as soon as they got down by 8, 10, 12 points, there was no shot at coming back. Those teams gave up.
Sure.
So I do think that they have the fight in them that it takes to get there. I just worry about Kolik's done it so well in the Big East, but there's still something that I don't know. I don't know if we have that score that says, can Tyler consistently give us 20, 25 a night in the tournament? That's, I guess, the question mark, which is why I go back to this team will go as far as he can carry them.
Yeah, it's going to come down to defense for me. Are those guys locked in every game? Then I think the Final Four is so plausible for us. But to Mitch's point, we kind of don't have the extra gear point scorer. And another thing that I always like to talk about is matchups. We're not big. So if we just run across a Bama or like even a Purdue is kind of not a good matchup for us. Obviously we could press them to death, but the biggest thing is who those matchup is. Like, are we going to see Baylor in the final to get to the championship game, or are we going to see Arizona who has Twin Towers? So it's going to make sure, we can make the Final Four, but who do we see from there on? So Final Four to me is plausible, but winning the championship, I think the percentages are low, unfortunately.
Okay.
It'll be a fun ride though. Shaka's got the guy. He has that team believing so much that I think that if it does come where Marquette isn't the last team standing, that game will be a fun game. It's not going to be a Marquette kind of bows down and ends up losing by double digits. I don't see that.
Okay. So if you had to bring out your pessimistic side, what would you say would have to happen for Marquette to get knocked out early?
Tyler Kolik gets hurt.
Or they run into a situation where, and this is probably a cop-out answer, but they run into foul trouble with Oso and a team like Michigan State or Kentucky that has some decent bigs that we just don't have the depth to cover that. That would be, or Kansas State even, right? Like if Oso or Omax get in foul trouble, who's going to cover Johnson? Like, that's just kind of I feel like the situations where they could get bit early.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was kind of alluding to before is how are these refs going to call the game? Just with I'm looking at the box score right now for Arizona State, Nevada. It's a blowout, and Arizona State has 9 fouls and Nevada has 8. So right now the refs, they're pointing to bonus every half or more, double bonus. So that doesn't bode well for us who were very thin in the front court. We have great guard depth. So I think teams that have really good depth are going to make good pushes. Once again, UConn, very heavy in depth, Gonzaga. And then we're looking at teams like we've mentioned, UCLA, not very deep. Tennessee lost their point guard. So I think it's going to come down to more depth than what you think in this NCAA tournament. And to Mitch's point, maybe I'm sleeping on Arizona and maybe I need to make some picks, stay up to 115 now. Make sure I'm reviewing Arizona a little bit more because I know they have some good depth, right? They go 9 deep.
Yeah. I'll expect a text from you at 12:30 being like, hey, did you see Arizona's strength of schedule this year?
I will. I'll send it to both of you.
Fair. Okay. Look, you give me a winner. Who do you think wins it all?
I got Houston. Sasser's going to be healthy. They play 4 or 5 guys that can score double digits, and they're a team that no one's really talking about, and they've just won all year. I think Alabama beat them in a really close game, but other than that, I mean, they lost that Temple game. I just feel like if this is Sampson's team to do it, or if Sampson has a team that does it, it's this one.
All right, Charchman, who do you think?
Believe it or not, but for some reason, I think Bill Self doesn't get enough credit for how good of a coach he is. They have the story. Jalen Wilson can average 26 a game. The only problem is if DeJuan Harris doesn't play well, they could get bounced. But I think I'm still going to ride Kansas.
Okay. You like them going back to back?
Yeah, I think if you take away Zach Edey, Jalen Wilson's the player of the year. So if Zach Edey wasn't here. So I'm just going to ride the best player that's getting a little bit underlooked, which is crazy to say just because of the Brandon Miller issues, how good Zach Edey was, how good Kansas was, their battle tested. I'm going to ride with them, actually.
Okay. I would really love to pick Duke. because I think that team's on a roll right now, but I think they are at a disadvantage from a coaching perspective. So I think I'm gonna roll with who I think is the best player in college basketball, and I'm gonna cop out and I'm gonna take Alabama and the 1 seed with Brandon Miller. All right. Anything else you guys want to add on the tournament? I want to talk some quick NFL because Mitch, you touched on Aaron Rodgers. I want to get you guys' thoughts on it. But anything else to add on the tournament before we close it out?
Bring on the madness.
Yeah, we can rip. We can let it rip now.
Give me a 16 seed. Give me a 15 seed, just not Vermont. Give me all the madness. I want everyone's perfect bracket done by 4 p.m.
Actually, give me that Virginia upset, just because that the Virginia upset always gets manifested. It's like every other year Virginia goes down.
Yeah.
That line's like 5.
Oh, I know.
So it's not wide. Yeah, that's a close game. So Vegas doesn't not a whole lot of confidence in Virginia. Okay. All right. So Mitch, you touched on Aaron Rodgers. It seems like it's a done deal. How are you guys feeling about it? You guys think it's pretty much a done deal? And what do you think the compensation is that the Packers get for Rodgers? Licky, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just ready for this to be over, given where the current construction of the team is, the cap issues, all of those kind of things. I don't think that we can field a team that gives us kind of this elite level to give it like another shot with Rodgers, just given all the cap situation. So, and I mean, we're at that pivot point with Love, right? We have to decide here within the next couple of weeks if we want to pick up his 5th year, which I'm assuming they will, just given the fact that like they've held on to him for this long. But I would venture to guess they're going to have to start working on an extension with him. So I am very thankful for everything that Rodgers has done for this organization. He has made being a fan of this team. I know every single year that this is going to be a team that has a chance to win the NFC and potentially get to the Super Bowl every single year. And there is a handful of organizations in the NFL that can say that. So for him to basically continue that was incredibly thankful. I am just exhausted from all of the other stuff that I'm ready to move on. I'm thankful for him, but I'm ready to move on and see what we have in Love. So you had mentioned the compensation thing. I think the Packers, it'll be interesting. I think they dig their heels in now that the Jets, he has publicly said he wants to play for the Jets. The Jets are basically signing his buddies. That I don't think that, and with all the pressure that the New York media brings, I don't think the Packers have to budge on their offer. It sounds like they're close. I don't think, given everything, that the Packers have to budge, and eventually the Jets, from all the pressure and everything, will move to where the Packers are at. I don't know if a first happens. It would be, if I'm good, I'm saying give us the 13th pick. You can have them. That's all we want. I don't know if they'll get that. If that's not the case, then, multiple second/thirds, maybe, that being 2 to 3. But I would be 100% content with just getting the 13th pick and giving them Rodgers.
Yeah, I think you have to at least minimum get that 13th pick. And then what I want is, potentially a young player, young wide receiver. If we could get a Denzel Mims, maybe a Corey Davis. I know there's some salary cap stuff, but I don't know. I want that 13th pick, and I want Jackson Smith from Ohio State. I want to steal Cincinnati Bengals blueprint, literally get 3 wide receivers around a young quarterback, just let it rip. Make sure we have the offensive line in place, and just we have Aaron Jones. The offense is sort of set. I think getting another wide receiver with that 13th pick would be good. And then, maybe we don't want those Jets wide receivers. That's fine with me, but just tie a conditional pick next year, right? If he comes back, tie it to performance. How is he doing? Maybe it's a conditional third, can get all the way to a first. That's kind of what I want. Get that 13th pick. You're going to get someone good, because there's going to be 3. You're going to get a top 10 player basically on your board, because Stroud, Richardson, Bryce Young are going to go.
Yep.
And just a couple of things that I'm a little disappointed in with the process is Mark Murphy. You're the president of the organization. Don't be saying stuff like you're not. If that was Brian Gutekunst saying that, so what, right? He's a GM. I think Mark Murphy is a clown for that, and maybe it's time for him to retire. But
and you
Mitch
mean him saying that bringing back Rodgers wasn't the priority, is what you mean, right?
Yeah, just kind of him saying his 2 cents. Just focused on running the organization. He's done a really good job. I've been in a title town. I thought the Green Bay Packers have made a very great investment up there, and it's really the experience outside of just tailgating. I thought he did a really good job. Mitch just gave Rodgers his flowers, so I can kind of move on and just talk about some of the stuff that me and Mitch text on a day-to-day basis about. Just like, how can you say out loud that 90% of you said you were retiring, but 10% said you were coming back? Like, this is such a play. And then I don't know the exact quote. Mitch was telling me about like AJ Hawk, like, oh, so you're saying like if they wanted you back, you'd be like, oh no, not really. There's a lot of different, opinions going around, but Rodgers is so tied up in his legacy and everything that he's trying to I feel like he's trying to create this narrative or this story. And then to Mitch's point, I'm just tired. And then I'm really excited for the Green Bay offense to actually have an identity. I felt like we were back in Mike McCarthy days of shotgun. So I'm really excited to see, a quarterback under center again, have our jet sweep motions again. So I think there's a lot to be thankful for 12, but we're not handcuffed, and we're going to have a quarterback that wants to meet his team at minicamp.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things Rodgers was bitching about, creating chemistry in that. I think that's another narrative for the Jet side. How will those young wide receivers act when Lazard comes in, Cobb, when Rodgers has the hand motions going? So, I kind of ran it there for a little bit, but we're thankful for 12. But I think overall stories, we're just kind of sick of it, and just this narrative of pointing a finger and doing that. It was very interesting. You could see his legacy right there, that him saying he's the best Green Bay Packer of all time. I don't know if Tom Brady does that.
But
Tom Brady knows that. Tom Brady knows he's the best player of all time.
Did Rodgers say that today in his interview?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
So there's just some things that was very interesting. So it's a big legacy movement and a Rodgers movement. So
yeah. I also would love Goot with 2 mid-first round picks, because in 2018, his ability to move around in early rounds is fantastic. I mean, that's kind of how he got Jair. I don't know if they would do this, but I just wanted to touch on one other thing. I think you're spot on with if they were to get the 13th and 15th pick, one of those has to be a wide receiver. They have to break this trend of not drafting a wide receiver in the first round. I also would love them, and I don't know if they would do this, where if they would take a wide receiver at 13, trade that 15th pick to a little bit later in the first round, pick up an additional second or third, or maybe even depending upon how far they drop, another first next year, and then taking one of the top tight ends, whether it's Michael Mayer or Kincaid from Utah, just getting an elite tight end as well, and being like, hey, Love, here you go. Like, it's your offense and you have a bunch of weapons now. So yeah, I would love to see what you would do there.
So breaking the Green Bay narrative of weapons. Let's just say, let's just put the middle finger up to Rodgers and say, yep, it's time for a first round wide receiver and a second round tight end. Yeah. I like that. I like that move by Goody, but I want to steal one thing. We trade that 13th pick. I think Goody wants nothing to do with that pick being Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's going to move that to either move up or move down. So if we do get that 13th pick, we're not staying there.
So what you're saying is you don't want that pick to be the guy that replaced Aaron Rodgers in a sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So whether we move up to 9 and then they're like, they can't officially tie it to Aaron Rodgers, or we, move back to 17.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I think you're getting a big change in leadership style, going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. Granted, we don't know a whole heck of a lot about Jordan Love, but from a leadership perspective, it can't get a whole lot of worse than Aaron Rodgers from what he's done in the past couple of years. So I think that's all we've got tonight. I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Any last words before we call it a night?
Yeah, I'm just interested to see how Jordan Love handles pressers. I think he's going to
Yeah.
take the high road, but I think it's just going to be really interesting to see as a Packer fan, just kind of see how he handles the media, how he handles, like, we've watched Rodgers kind of sit on the sidelines and kind of just sit by himself. How is Love going to, see what he's seen in the Green Bay media and kind of turn that into who he's going to be as the Green Bay quarterback of the future? So that's just one thing I want to watch going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Ricky,
last thing I'll
tell us
put is we are Marquette.
All right. Well, you guys heard Mitch is on Houston, and Scharschmidt. Who did you go with?
It's all right. It's all right. It's Kansas. It's
Kansas.
It's a safe. It's a
Okay.
safe pick. It's a safe
Fair.
pick.
All right. And I'm on the Alabama I'm on the Alabama Brandon Millers to win the tournament this year. So I appreciate you guys all for listening. Thanks, Mitch and Mitch, for joining me tonight. Again, like the video, subscribe so you get the next ones. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yep. Thank you.